Not surprised, but a little bummed.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Chris Bell is entering the transfer portal. Let's talk about it here on Locked On Syracuse. Hello, everyone. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and of course, we're always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's mini podcast, we are going to talk about Chris Bell entering the transfer portal. This is not surprising, but a little bummed that it just did not work out between Chris Bell and Syracuse basketball over the past 3 years. And then later on in this podcast, we'll talk about how Syracuse basketball can replace Chris Bell. Before we get to everything, a little background on Chris Bell. He is a junior forward who plans to enter the transfer portal per multiple reports out there. Bell spent 3 years at Syracuse University. He averaged 9 points per game for his career, shot 38% as well from the three-point line. And Bell was second in the ACC in three-point percentage in 2024. I believe it was at 42%. Chris Bell just had a ridiculous year in 2024 from beyond the arc. And Chris Bell is the second Syracuse basketball player to plan to enter the transfer portal, joining Kyle Cuff. The reason why I say plan to enter the portal is because nobody can officially enter the portal until midnight on Monday when it officially opens. This is not surprising at all. You can kind of see this coming very early on in the season when Chris Bell was struggling. At one point, he lost his starting job. But still, I am bummed out that it had to come to this, where the two sides, they just needed a divorce from each other. And hopefully it ends up being a win-win for Syracuse and for Chris Bell. I wish Chris Bell nothing but the best. It's not like he's a bad human or anything. It just did not work out as the player with Syracuse basketball. He had a promising 2024 season. I mentioned the elite three-point shooting he had that year. He started all 32 games, averaged 12 points per game, and we were hoping that he would take that next step entering 2024-25 and become a better all-around player while also maintaining his elite shooting. Instead, it's unfortunate. Chris Bell, for one reason or another, you want to blame the player, you want to blame the coach, it's probably a little bit of both. He ended up regressing a good bit in 2024-25. His numbers were down across the board, and that includes his three-point percentage. Bell, already not a really good defender, got worse defensively in 2025, at least according to Evan Maya. The Evan Maya defensive rating for 2024 was a negative 0.09, so he wasn't even a positive defender that year. And in 2025, it got worse, 0.29. Overall, this is just one of those situations where it's best for Syracuse and it's best for Chris Bell to both go their separate ways. And I hope that Chris Bell finds a new home where he shines and at least regains the form that he showed in 2024, or even develop into a much better basketball player, because you know that there is talent there with Chris Bell. He's 6'7", he's long, he has a good shot, but for one reason or another, it just didn't work with Syracuse. And for a Syracuse perspective, we're hoping that we can find a better replacement than Chris Bell, because we'll talk about it in the next segment. As much as he was a liability in a lot of aspects of the game, he was an elite three-point shooter, and three-point shooters do not grow on trees in college basketball. So overall, I'm wishing Chris Bell nothing but the best, but this was a divorce that seemed like it needed to happen, and you could see it coming from a mile away. Now, coming up, we'll talk about some options Syracuse basketball is looking at to replace Chris Bell. That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada PRO-4X, The numbers are on an MVP level with the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds. It can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro-4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro-4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. And with Syracuse basketball and the transfer portal and all the news that we're probably going to hear over the next few days and weeks, I could certainly use a 5 Hour Energy, whether I'm at a game or traveling. 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. And if you need one now, you can grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse, and we are reacting to Chris Bell entering the transfer portal per multiple reports out there. There is one area where Syracuse is really going to miss Chris Bell, and that is his three-point shooting. Despite a down year in 2024-25 for Chris Bell, we were all hoping he would get better, but as I explained, he did not. He still shot 38% from the three-point line, which is certainly above average. 38% is a pretty good year, and he got better down the stretch. And if I have my stats correctly, I believe Chris Bell, he started the year really cold, but in ACC play, he shot over 40% from the three-point line. So, like it or not, Syracuse basketball is going to have to replace his three-point shooting because he was really good at that aspect of basketball, And fortunately enough, Syracuse basketball has shown interest in 2 players so far in the transfer portal, and they both could fill the outside shooting void that Chris Bell leaves. Number 1, we've talked about him. Same thing with number 2 and Jacari White. But number 1 is Kobe MaGee from Drexel. Kobe MaGee is 6'6", so he could easily replace Chris Bell, not just because of his shooting, but also because of his position. He plays the forward spot, also a little bit of 2-guard as well. Kobe MaGee last year at Drexel shot 44% from the three-point line, are nearly 6 3-point attempts per game. So he shot the ball a ton from beyond the arc, and guess what? He made a good bit of them. So I like Kobe MaGee, even though he played at Drexel. On top of that, Kobe MaGee averaged 6 rebounds per game last season. Chris Bell, not really known as a rebounder when he was at Syracuse. In my opinion, Kobe MaGee is a better basketball player, at least right now, than Chris Bell. So if you're talking about a 1-for-1 replacement, I think MaGee is our guy. Next up, as I just told you all, Jacari White from North Dakota State. He's not really a Chris Bell replacement as far as the position that he would play because he's 6'3", he's 170 pounds, he's an off-ball guard, but he can replace Chris Bell's shooting prowess. So if Syracuse decides to get a different wing player in the transfer portal that maybe isn't that great at shooting the three-pointer, well, Jacari White can shoot the 3-ball at a very high level. Last season, he shot 40% from the three-point line. It was at North Dakota State, and he did it on nearly 7 attempts per game from distance. So both MaGee and White shot a ton of threes last year and made a ton of threes last year. I think both make sense for Syracuse basketball in the transfer portal next season. And of course, we'll keep an eye on who else Syracuse basketball might be pursuing in the portal over the next few days and weeks. Now, coming up here on Locked On Syracuse, tomorrow the plan is to do 2 podcasts. Number 1, a catch-up podcast, everything Syracuse football related, because there's been a lot of Syracuse football news recently. We'll talk about the latest with Fran Brown and Deion Sanders discussing a potential spring game. There is a follow-up to the original mini podcast I did. It's good news on that front, I should say. We'll talk about the Syracuse spring roster. Mark Petrie back. Zeed Haynes, he retired. And also some Syracuse football recruiting news as well. Again, good and bad recruiting news. And then at midnight, here's the plan. So the transfer portal is opening up on Monday, March 24th, and I assume it'll be at midnight. I want to do a full podcast preview guide, everything you need to know about Syracuse basketball and the transfer portal for this upcoming season. So those are the plans coming up here on Locked On Syracuse. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. And you can find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And also, there's going to be a lot of news coming out in the next couple of days and weeks with Syracuse in the transfer portal, players leaving, players coming in. Who is Syracuse interested in? So you're going to want to subscribe to Locked On Syracuse so you don't miss anything. I will see you all again soon.